Welcome to episode 10 of the Revolution podcast, where I, your host Ryan, sit down with industry experts to discuss the latest trends in e-mobility, clean tech, and the future of transportation. Today is actually our first ever special edition of the podcast, where we'll be focusing on the transformation of Revolution as part of EVBox's 10th anniversary. Today I'm joined by Hugo Pereira, Chief of Staff and Growth Officer at EVBox. Hugo has played a massive role in the growth of both EVBox and Revolution since he joined the company in 2015. Into the episode we go. Thank you for joining this special edition of the Revolution podcast, Hugo, which is part of EVBox's 10th anniversary and actually the 10th episode of the podcast. I'd love to start by learning about your background and role at EVBox.
Yeah, sure. So I've been mostly around always the areas of product marketing and overall strategy. Prior to EVBox, I've been spending most of the career on startups, scale-ups in the business intelligence, HR tech, leadership development industries, mostly software as a service companies, but also service providing companies. So EVBox actually was the first time that I got connected with the future of transportation and the mobility industry. As I joined 5 years ago, I didn't know a single thing about electric mobility. It was quite a new area for me. But I got quickly to understand how fascinating it could be and can be as a trigger for better air quality, the connection with renewable energy, as well as evolving transportation to be more sustainable. So that has been quite a path in the last 5 years as we grew the organization from 15 to 600 people and beyond on all the other metrics. And today I serve as the Chief Growth Officer, as mentioned. So I oversee policy, marketing, and strategy. So I ensure that there is the right growth strategy, the team behavior, the brand positioning, and overall policy philosophy to advance the industry and the company.
And you've actually been at EVBox since 2015, so 5 years of the 10 years since EVBox was founded.
Yeah, that is correct. 2015 I joined. Luckily, I had met Christoph, which is our CEO, of course, in the last 5 years as well. I knew him from before from Belgium tech startups.
Okay.
And we connected really well on the latest venture I had, which was an HR tech firm called Talent Square. We connected by then when we were looking for a series round of funding or an exit. And through that connection, he became in that period he became CEO of EVBox. And at the time he kindly shared with me his vision, his philosophy, and what he believes that could become EVBox. And of course, it's only dreams and hopes at the time. But I'm glad that I sticked around enough to see many of those hopes and dreams become true, including Revolution, of course.
Yeah, and on that note of Revolution, was hosting an annual conference part of the plans early on, or was this something that came once we grew as a company?
Yeah, so I believe that at the beginning, as we join and try to understand the market and what kind of brand we want to position and what kind of marketing philosophy we want to apply, I don't believe that we intended to build our own event. Some of the things happen by default and as a coincidence of many lucky situations. But it is a good story because we were in 2016 actually. So before Revolution happened, we were going to a lot of trade shows and seminars, not as to have a booth, but actually to visit and learn and try to get deeper into the industry. So after being a year and a half, and especially 2016, throughout the trade shows and seminars in the industry, found that there was nothing unique across them. They were all very traditional, and most of them were actually not even addressing the purpose of the industry. Were mostly product driven. They were not bringing competitors together, partners together. It was a very silo approach to events, and that's normal when you are in a mature industry. But such a fast growing industry as electric mobility, we felt that there was an empty slot that was not being met. And of course, as a marketeer by nature, not just myself, but even Christoph as a marketeer, we are also very empowered to see certain events evolve. So if you look at Salesforce with Dreamforce, Inbound with HubSpot from a marketing point of view, those are great events that were built by these companies and even grew beyond to become almost like a mandatory pit stop every now and then for every marketeer. So of course, we believe in the power of communities and building communities that can enable and empower the collaboration across multiple stakeholders. So So yeah, in 2016 we decided maybe we should try to do something ourselves and just see how it goes. So initially we wanted to create a seminar, and we were trying to do a play of words, and then revolution at the time was even written with small caps, and then EV was in big caps, kind of to give the symbol to the electric vehicle as a trigger to generate a revolution in the transportation and energy sector.
Yeah.
So that was the initial pun intended. Of course, the brand evolved beyond just electric vehicles. It evolved more to sustainability and sustainable mobility. But we actually had, few people know this, but we actually had a first trial event in 2016 around September that we wanted to do. And we actually canceled it around August 2016 because, one, we felt that the adoption was still at a low level and was after the holidays. Something didn't feel right. It felt like was nothing unique about it. It was very much, it felt like just any other seminar. So you realize then that every event should have, if you want to do this, that should be something special to stand out and make a powerful and engaging experience rather than just being any other seminar and conference.
And in terms of the initial conversations, were you reaching out to other e-mobility companies?
At the beginning, we first asked our partners, if they feel that there is something that they will be missing. We asked some of our customers, we asked some of our partners. We just had a bit of a round, and then the initial setup was, okay, why will people come to Revolution? And that's when we decided to actually build a manifesto for the industry with competitors, partners, and customers. So we brought about 15 experts together. And at the same time, we had a survey that we released to European North American drivers, and I believe 800 or almost 1,000 responses were gathered. So we used the survey and the expertise of the different decision makers to actually build and create a manifesto. And it was really, and the idea was, okay, let's release that manifesto. And then everything came together. I was like, okay, if you're going to release the manifesto, why not doing it at an event? Then Revolution name came together. Then we did it in March. And then all of those elements came together to the first edition. So that's how it all brought together. But I think first was the content. Yeah, first we focus, okay, what are we bringing to the industry? And then once we saw that this actually is quite powerful and there's a lot of really interesting insights here, that everyone could benefit from it. Even competitors could benefit from it. Doesn't matter, it's about advancing the industry, not just ourselves. Because the wider and bigger the industry becomes, the more opportunities there are for a company like EVBox to also grow. And that's the kind of cause effect that we were hoping to create as well, to collaborate. So yeah, so it's really exciting to see a bit more than 200 people at the iFilm Institute in Amsterdam, which is a beautiful venue.
Yeah. And
the goal was to inspire the community. That's why we brought, for example, the sustainable advocate Monica Raya, Zachary Shen as well from Clean Panic. We brought a couple of them, and that's when we launched the manifesto. And that set up the combination for what became Revolution in the years to come, with engaging experiences, powerful keynotes, and always an element of surprise.
Okay, and was Revolution always an in-house EVBox conference in its creation, or did we have input from external parties?
No, so I think one of the most amazing things, and I of course there's always different stories, but I'm actually really proud that it was built with the energy and expertise and creativity of the EVBox team. Of course, particularly the marketing team, but overall the whole organization contributed to it. And that's the beauty of it. It's an in-house effort of an organization that today translates even beyond the organization. So it's not just EVBox group inviting and bringing people together. Is the partners, is competitors, is collaborators, is customers, all of them wanting to come together for this unique event as a way to connect and collaborate. And but the beginning, the kickoff, of course, has to start with someone, and we are proud it was like an internal effort, so there was no external influence. But of course, we do have external agencies that evolved, and today there's a higher collaboration with partners such as, for example, Miss Telly, that helps us build up the concept and the logistics and the organization, because the event grew. And when we started, was just like, let's see how it goes, we can make all the plans we want, but was mostly like, okay, the first event was quite successful, was very rewarding. Let's go for a second one. And then the year after, in 2018, we had about 500 people joining again in Amsterdam. in a wide venue, which was quite amazing. It was a passenger terminal. If you ever stop by Amsterdam listening to this podcast, then I recommend to stop by, because it's quite an impressive complex and next to the music center. So we evolved the concept to also be about contribution. So the first edition was very much one way, the speakers to the audience. So then, we still replicated the inspiration. So we had Tony Seba, Colin McCrasher from Bloomberg. And then the afternoon was fully focused on a brainstorming event. So we did a massive brainstorm with 500 people. And a few of the initiatives and suggestions were actually taken forward to businesses and different policy makers, which was quite interesting. And it was a second event. And then even then we didn't know if you're going to continue or not, because it's quite an investment of time, as you mentioned. But last year was the year it became clear that this is such a great space that the industry recognizes. So when we had close to 1,000 people last year at the Westergasfabriek in Amsterdam again, which was once a gas plant and now refurbished in a sustainable way to be an event complex.
Yeah.
And again, we just brought together the winning method. So we had Ron Geran, former NASA astronaut, Dirk Alborn, the CEO of Hyperloop, Martin Rommelt, which was from Volkswagen heading mobility, and Isabel Cochet, which was a former CEO of NG. So that kind of inspiration is hard to find in seminars, which are very much dealt into the practicalities and the industry, which is great. So bringing the best of both worlds, engagement, inspiration, and also practical activities that people can take home. I think that's quite a beautiful community that we built for the industry. And now it is a place that everyone has to be every year. At least the decision makers, the people that influence the industry, want to be part of this experience, because it is what it is at the end, which is an experience for the industry, which has not been replicated in any other event so far.
Yeah, and you've touched upon it there. I do think that Revolution is more interactive than a typical conference, allowing both keynote speakers and attendees to share their ideas in the same space.
Yeah, no, that's that. I think today everyone is trying to cover certain gaps. And at the beginning, when we built the conference or the brand, was really about filling a need in the industry. There was a need to have a place where you can pause, reflect, and think bigger. You needed to have a place where decision makers come together. We needed a place where businesses come to spark ideas and collaborate, build partnerships. We also needed inspiration to see that we are here for the bigger purpose. And all of that happens at Revolution. There's no other place or brand, or at least a movement that combines inspiration, innovation, and collaboration in one go. You have competitors, partners, policymakers, CEOs, overall business managers, all together thinking about the evolution of the industry, the present situation, and how we're going to make sustainable. And I think that's quite a powerful force to have with the event and beyond.
Yeah, and I'd love to deep dive on 2017 in particular. I'm going to put you on the spot here, but is there anything you'd change in regards to the format or organization? Or is it more of a learning experience for future conferences?
Not necessarily. I think it's hard. It's always good to go back, and of course, we'll love to have changed certain things more on. Like maybe we'll have loved to make the area for collaboration a bit more collaborative. At the time, it was very much cafe kind of style, but it was the first time we were doing. There was not like much of an experience digitally. It was all very offline. Now it's a combination of both. So of course, there are things that you always can change, but the beauty of looking back is that, through those changes of trying out is how we found out the things to improve and how to bring the event to become better and better and better, to keep surprising ourselves. And of course, if you look at the first event and the last event, it's day and night, and you can see the evolution. But the foundation and some of the elements are still coming back from the first one. The call for inspiration comes from the very first foundation of, okay, let's make sure that we always kick off, or that there is always a moment of inspiration in the day that leaves people thinking and debriefing the day. Let's make sure that we have practical outcomes and takeaways for the people joining, and let's make sure we keep on pushing forward and augmenting the collaboration amongst everyone. And I think those principles that were set from the very beginning are still present. And I think that's the most, I would say, commendable thing to see that despite being already 3 years ago, that, it was kept the foundation and the core of what made the event the success that it is today.
Okay, and in regards of the venue, you mentioned the Westergas, which we used in 2019. How important was it to find a venue that matched our sustainability and clean tech ambitions?
I think it became gradually more important. So when we began, was very much practical. We need to find an event that is nice. There's some story, but there was not much of a connectivity with a film institute, museum, and electric mobility. It was more like this is a good venue with a great view, good conditions for what we want to kick off the first event with. As we evolved, we start to make sure that our story matches the sustainability aspect of things. So the Westergasfabriek also matches that. Yeah, it was a gas chamber or a gas pipeline in the past, or
Yeah.
I don't remember exactly how it was called. If it was a gas plant.
Yeah.
And then the whole refurbishment, it's also built in a sustainable way. There's now sustainable materials. There's a community around there. You also, if you are inside, it's quite an impressive building that feels almost like, as the host Roger Atkins said, feels like a spaceship. So you also feel like you are being kind of part of the future. But it's what we are capable of doing inside that is really fascinating. Yeah, the fact that we recycle everything, that we were able to use sustainable foods, and that we were actually prepared to go full on vegan or vegetarian in this year's edition, prior to postponing it due to the current situation with COVID-19. So the sustainable materials, removing all the papers. Yeah, so when you go to trade shows and events and fairs, especially one that is addressing electric mobility, you still find countersensing that there's so much paper and waste happening on almost all the booths. And I'm proud to see that Revolution actually as an event, as a place that the decision makers go to, that there is quite a conscious practice on everything we produce and how we produce, and what kind of food is consumed and how people get there. The fact that we also compensate the CO2 emissions in average of all the attendees that have to travel to the event. So it is part of our DNA to become more and more sustainable and become a reference, not just for the industry, but for every event organizer or trade show or conference that is set and created on a yearly basis for any industry.
Yeah, and an overriding theme for all of the conferences so far has been the host city of Amsterdam, which is a city well known for its sustainability efforts. Was it a conscious decision to choose a city that represents the conference's goals?
Well, a few things here. So I would say that the global event of Revolution being in Amsterdam, it's becoming kind of historic. Yeah, if it will change or not, to be seen. I cannot guess the future, but I would say for now, if the physical events can return post COVID-19, I would say that's definitely still a city that has such a drive for sustainability. Yeah, by 2025, one wants to eliminate every full car to be in the city. There's quite a trajectory to have everything electrified in the city, but also from a renewable energy usage, from food agriculture. It is a city that is striving and pushing for sustainability on a daily practice, and especially on transportation, becoming stricter and stricter with what has been happening and what is the intention of it. I think it's also a city that has the most dense and most amount of charging points almost in a city. Yeah, there's over 2,000 charging points for electric cars. There's the availability of car sharing, with all of them being electric, is also phenomenal. So there is a lot of good examples. And of course, everyone rides a bicycle in the Netherlands and in Amsterdam, which makes things easier. So I think it's a beautiful city in that sense. It's central, allows a lot of the world to come together. So in that sense, yes. Having said this, we have witnessed Revolution also diversifying. Yeah, we had Revolution connected in the US, in New York, and we never know the future. So even at the New York event brought together the same kind of mindset of inspiration, collaboration, and mostly focus on the North or the Americas segment and market, because it's not easy to also travel to Europe at all times. So you never know. Maybe looking at the future, maybe there'll be Revolution in Asia, in Europe, and in North America, or having in mind also the sustainable aspect of things. Maybe the digital component of things plays a bigger role moving forward. And maybe, the digital is also an answer to get more people engaged online and collaborate, rather than just a physical event. And I think that's the evolution that's happening for a lot of the events out there.
Yeah, the timing was really interesting actually, because Revolution was already beginning to evolve into a hybrid brand with the podcast, etc. But recent months have also allowed digital events to thrive in general.
Yeah, no, I think the brand and the evolution adapted to the pandemic situation, if you can call it, quite well. I believe it showcased all its brand power, capability of change, especially during the pandemic. Here, mostly due to the team that worked behind the scenes, that did such an incredible effort and job at revamping the whole concept, and was able to not just secure all the partnership speakers, workshops, and to continue the movement and build digital touch points for the time being. Yeah, we had the first Revolution Digital in the end of March. I believe there was about almost 1,800 people registered and 1,600 attended the whole event, the whole digital experience, which was more than any other revolution, which is pretty amazing considering the amount of, I don't know, digital conferences and webinars out there and how many people sticked and attended it, which shows the value of it.
Yep.
So the podcast that we are now today is another great example of having creative alternatives and ideas and initiatives to engage the audience in different ways.
Yep.
So it is a mobility brand that is still powered by EVBox Group, but is welcoming all the companies of the industry, partners, to collaborate, to think, and to accelerate the transition towards sustainable mobility. And I think that's the beauty of it. It becomes a hybrid brand, as you mentioned, and look forward to everything it can accomplish.
For sure. And something I find fascinating is looking back at keynotes from the past and reminiscing about anything that might have come to fruition since then. Do you remember anything in particular from 2017 or after?
Yeah, there's a couple of things that if I look back, it's interesting if you can recall back and see some of the elements. There are still some things that I really recognize that actually was good evolution. So I remember that Thomas from the Mobility House was one of the keynote speakers in the morning, and he was talking about the project of how vehicle to grid can really help out, the future of energy and how to balance the grid and also to take the most benefit of the electric cars. And then, in the last years, I've seen what they have done with the island of Madeira in Portugal, where they use the energy, the grid, their software, the electric car and the electric charging station, and how they bring it all together to prove that vehicle to grid can happen, and this whole vehicle to infrastructure is there is something in the future that can make it work. And that story about the island of Madeira and what they have done there is fascinating. It was something that I heard the first time as an intention, and then it became reality. So it's nice to see that. There was also calls for interoperability in roaming because the players were not coming together. So there was a few workshops or a few speakers on a panel that were coming from different parts of the industry, sharing the frustration of not having open networks, and then advancement of open protocols such as OCPI happened, and it has evolved a lot. And just in the case of EVBox Group alone, we connected our charging network to GREV, has to be charge point further on. So you can see that there's still a lot of work to do, and we have to recognize that the work is not yet fully done, and there's a lot to evolve. But we are getting together. You can see that we are starting to put the businesses and the drivers at the front seat and see, okay, how can we make the experience easy for them, and make sure we work together to ensure that the experience is great. And if the experience is great, then we can also collaborate and compete, because healthy competition is also fruitful for the industry.
Yeah.
So those are some of the examples. I remember also that there was a panel with cities talking about how they see the future of electric mobility for them. We had Norway, we had Amsterdam, we had a French city, Paris, I believe. I have to remember my memory. But they were empowering the diversification of government incentives beyond just subsidies for purchase of EVs, to think beyond that. And now we start to see governments creating incentives and rebates in North America and Europe for charging infrastructure, for renewable energy integration, for startups. So you see this diversification, which is really great. And yeah, even I remember some partnerships that happened at the event between utilities, automotive, or charging players that are still ongoing today. So there were some things that happened at the event from the very beginning that I can recall back and see it. I also remember, seeing EVBox LV, the home charging station, being launched, and now I see it being used by drivers around the world, which is also rewarding for anyone that is trying to drive the industry, to see the adoption of electric mobility. So those things are all things that I can recall back and see the evolution there. and even to the policy makers. The manifesto went forward, and one of the things was actually to also look into smart charging infrastructure and to open the directive that is called the AFID Alternative Fuels Directive, and to see if we can evolve that. And now is actually open and is actually up for revision, which is an important element for the advancement of the industry. So you see a lot of callbacks on things that we discuss and now are becoming a reality, which is exciting, because we see that the industry is definitely evolving and empowering others.
Yeah, and you've touched upon it there with the element of collaboration. With the e-mobility industry so new, it is important for people and businesses to collaborate as much as they can in order to raise awareness. And we've seen this recently with Charge Up Europe. And Revolution is right there in providing that platform for discussion and collaboration.
Yes, that's definitely. I'm always very fond of thinking that competition is here to learn from, to collaborate with, and to compete with. And that's a thing that we can learn a lot from competitors, because they also empower us to do better, and vice versa. We have to collaborate because we are here to advance the industry. It's a small industry, as you said. There's hopefully by the end of the year we have about 10 million electric cars around the world. If we really want to be an industry with hundreds of millions of EVs on the road, and that doesn't mean that we'll be increasing the stock, because I hope that with the transition and electrification, also the number of cars on the road will reduce. And the adoption of ride sharing and other elements that are also sustainable will be also increasing. So it doesn't mean that we will replace everything around the world with electric cars. I think there's also going to be an evolution of behavior, and that's what I think people are sometimes missing to see, which is the transformation of electric mobility is not just about the cars, it's about the adoption and integration of renewable energy to power the country's electricity and energy. It's also about improving the technology that we use and integrating the technology of solar panels, battery storage, electric vehicle charging. So it's going to become a better model for everyone. And also to question how the future of transport is, and how we're going to move around cities, countries, and if everything becomes more sustainable, air quality improves, and we can all live a more healthier life. So there's a lot of cause effect, which I really believe that's why it's such an important trigger to move forward all in the same direction. And it starts with competitors aligning on which kind of experience we want to offer, and then compete on how we differentiate from each other, and that's a healthy competition, and having a good conflict of how to bring things together is also a way of progressing.
Okay, and next I wanted to discuss a topic that has been particularly relevant all around the world recently, and this is diversity and ensuring that we try to represent everybody as well as we can. The automotive industry hasn't always had a reputation of being particularly diverse, but it is increasing. How have you witnessed a change since you joined EVBox, and do you think the future is bright?
Well, let me put it this way. Personally, I think the future of diversity in any industry is going to keep evolving, and it's going to keep getting better and better. If I compare the situation today with 5 years ago, with 10 years ago, or with 15 years ago, is quite different as of today. I think we are just witnessing such a fast-paced environment and ecosystem that sometimes it's hard to understand how much change you have already gone through. If I look at the last 5 years, when I joined an organization of 15 people, all Dutch, and I was the first non-Dutch. One can question diversity, but then it starts with the small gestures. I started, and if you have the right authenticity, openness to try new things and to keep bringing the best people, and also to empower and to say we are open for everyone, whatever is your belief, background, gender. If you start being open for that, and if you start really building that collaborative and authentic environment, for some reason you start attracting each other. And it's just more beyond nationalities, because I think diversity is an element that more and more organizations, startups and scale-ups are really leveraging it. The case of EVBox, there's on a worldwide level already 60 nationalities working at a company, which by default inherits a lot of different beliefs, values, but all coming together for the purpose of the industry and the organization. I think the next question is about belonging, and then that's the tough one, which is how do you bring this equality, diversity, culture in a way that everyone feels a sense of belonging, because that's ultimately what people are seeking, is to seek to belong to something bigger than themselves, to belong to something that they feel at their best, and to belong to a space where they can feel continuously learning and respected. And that's the pursuit that I believe organizations in the automotive industry have to seek. And if they go after that, hopefully it will trigger more and more diverse group of people to join and adopt this industry. And I think it's going to change, because now automotive is more than just cars. I think it feels that it's about cars, but it's becoming more than just cars, because the electric car is also about having a technology is like a battery on wheels with a lot of technology on the inside. It is different because the car becomes an experience. Yeah. Before, why would software developers will go to the automotive world? What is exciting there? If you go to a traditional full car, it's a bunch of buttons, and there's so many different parts that is almost frustrating to drive. I know that many people think differently, but I'm personally pleased with electric mobility because it feels simpler, and it's about also the embodiment of technology. I think it also comes hand in hand, it's like to see this evolution of how the car becomes an experience of your listening to music, of you being able to listen to a podcast, to have a comfortable car where everyone is present there, can have a conversation. You never know how the car is going to evolve, and especially if autonomous vehicles and self-driving will become a reality in the future, and that I hope to live and see, then definitely the car is going to become a different experience. So the automotive industry is going to become different. It's not going to be about driving. It's going to be about moving. And I think that changes completely the ecosystem of what happens inside the car. So hence, if you are part of that industry, of the mobility industry in general, you're also being part of a future that is going to be very different from what maybe older generations will have experienced. At least that's my view on it.
So you're almost saying that the technological advancements in the industry will actually attract more people and more diversity.
Yeah. We'll attract different profiles, and hopefully it also adjusts the idea that I don't know, like the automotive industry. If I want to go through a stereotype kind of approach, I could say that is a very male-driven industry. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that is the truth in the future. Who says that? Who says that will be the reality in the future, as long as we keep challenging it and bringing innovation and being open for it and being conscious, because I think the first step is awareness. And I think now the industry is starting to be aware, okay, we have to do better. Simple as that. We have to do better. And once the question starts, then we start thinking about, okay, how can we do better? Do we have any biases? Simple things like, is the way that we name cars affecting the way people perceive if it's a male or female gender? I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud now that I'm talking to you, but maybe there's a lot of like biases that are created on how we build the products in the automotive industry that maybe we have forgotten. And for example, when we were naming our products, we spend a lot of time trying to understand some of those biases. And of course, you never find a fully perfect solution, but you can always at least have it into account and understand how this affects you or not.
Yeah, and something we haven't discussed, but very relevant today, is that tomorrow we'll be stickering our public charging stations with our Pride design for the third year in a row. And this is one of our initiatives in promoting diversity. What impact do you think something like this has, and could other companies do something similar to show our industry is moving forward and embracing change?
Oh, that's a really great question. Very, very insightful, Brian. I'm not sure if I have the answer, but I see, like my philosophy, and I cannot say it's a company philosophy because it's a very hard one, but I do believe that if you don't stand for anything, you might fall for nothing.
Yeah.
So, and I think we are living in an era where companies or businesses or leaders have to start accepting the fact that you do have to stand for something, and you do have to take a stand, and you cannot be neutral. Being neutral is easy, but taking the easy route is never how you build a legacy and a household name that really stands out and becomes a powerful driver of positive change. So in my view, if you want to drive positive change, we cannot just drive positive change on what we offer, but on how we do things. And how we do things in the organization is through how we embrace our values, and at least at TV Walk, I can say that our values are about being passionate and being reliable and being human in an overall sense. So these are topics that are important for the people that make our customers happy on a daily basis, our partners also satisfied and delighted, our competitors to learn from us and to also help us evolve, and policymakers to feel that we are a very knowledgeable house. So that means you also have to be comfortable to address certain topics, or at least to have the space to address them. So the Pride is a great initiative because it allows to have the conversation in an organization. And I think that's an important part of a place where you spend 8 hours a day or less or more, and trying to make the best out of it. So if you spend such a big amount of time, you should also start having such conversations, and that's what it allows. It allows to trigger the conversation, and even in unforeseen circumstances. I remember that when I was doing myself 2 years ago, the how can you call it when you wrap? You wrap the stations with a Pride campaign in Amsterdam. It does bring out the conversation. I remember doing that wrapping with some other colleagues, and we were talking about that. I never had talked to them about that situation. We were talking, how do you see it? And we talked about all sorts of things, and how our families perceive Pride and the evolution of it. And those topics are things that you don't bring on the day-to-day work and bring you closer. And then, does also affect work positively. Also allow me to talk with citizens. We had some citizens approaching us and saying, why are you doing this?
Yeah.
And we had a conversation. Some of them were a bit more harsh, more I would say, I'll say not aggressive is not the right word, but they were more like out there, trying to explain, but allows to have the conversation. And I think that's an amazing initiative, because you start with the conversation, and with respect, we can start understanding each other.
Okay, well, I think that's a great place to finish, Hugo. But before we wrap up, looking forward to Revolution Digital 2.0 on September 8th. What are you most excited to see?
Well, so I think the agenda is not yet open, but it's going to be soon. Yeah. So I would say that I'm definitely excited for the keynotes, and the panel is a very interesting group of people coming together. So I'm really excited to hear about them. And I'm particularly excited for the engaging part of the digital event, and to be actively engaged on the topics that are really addressing or blocking the industry, and hopefully discuss what can we do in order to unblock them and accelerate the transition to sustainable mobility. Because now is even a better time. We are seeing that if there is a time to make a change, now even more, because now it's a time to come together and to revamp business models, and bring new businesses, new partnerships, and advance the industry. And people are more conscious about the impact on the environment. And Europe just launched a new Green Deal, which is really exciting. A lot of states in the US are increasing the adoption and uses of renewable energy and electric mobility. And there's New York just launched almost a 1 billion program for electrification. So there's a lot of exciting things happening, and I'm excited to hear about some of these news at these events, and I'm excited for the collaboration that might come out of it.
Yeah, and I think the beauty of it is that it is available to anybody anywhere in the world, and I certainly encourage people to register on revolutionconference.com. Thank you for joining the podcast, Hugo.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks everyone for listening.
Another great conversation for EVBox's 10th anniversary, and it was really insightful to welcome Hugo to discuss Revolution's transformation since its inception, diversity in the automotive industry, and how collaboration is fundamental in ensuring e-mobility continues to grow. We'll be back for another episode soon.